Well, hello, future CRNA. Welcome back to another episode of CRNA School Prep Academy podcast. I'm Jenny Fennell, your host and CRNA, and today we're doing a special episode, shaking it up a little bit, because guess what? We're coming up on our 1-year podcast anniversary. That's right. So today is March 2nd. On March 9th, we are celebrating our 1-year anniversary as a podcast, and I'm so excited and thrilled to be achieving this milestone. And I first want to thank you for being loyal listeners. It means a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in every week. I love you all, and I'm so excited for your future. So today we're going to do something a little different as far as we're going to kind of recap the top 3 episodes of 2021. So first and foremost, we're going to bring you study techniques. This just so happened to be the very second episode we ever released, and it still is one of the most popular downloaded episodes of all time. So thank you for that. And I'm so excited what I shared with you on my journey as far as how I learned how to study effectively for myself really resonated with you. And I'm excited to let you guys kind of get another sneak peek. If you want to listen to the whole episode, go over all the way back to episode number 2 to listen to the whole thing. But today we're going to bring you about 10 minutes of this episode to kind of give you a good takeaway from it. Next, we're going to talk about rejection from CRNA school. And this episode really kind of paints a more realistic picture on what it's like to apply to CRNA school, and also kind of just highlights the fact that this journey is tough. And so I'm really excited that this is one of your favorite episodes because I want to give you that guidance and support. That way you keep pushing through even when things get difficult. And then last but not least is another favorite episode, and that is tackling your CRNA school interview. This is episode number 9, and this episode was with guest expert contributor to CSPA, Richard Wilson. Richard Wilson is a faculty member. He has been serving as a faculty member and teaching anesthesia for over 11 years now. He is also CRNA School Prep Academy's expert contributor to our academy. He is a friend. He's a colleague. He's amazing, and he just loves all of you guys so much. He shares the same passion I have as far as helping you advance in this career path. So again, he breaks down in episode number 9 all the different aspects of tackling the CRNA interview and things that maybe you haven't even thought about. So again, I hope you guys enjoy this episode, and thank you so much for tuning in. Now into the show. I'm Jenny Fennell, CRNA and founder of CRNA School Prep Academy. I have always had a passion for helping those who aspire to become a CRNA. A couple of years ago, I started mentoring a handful of prospective students. Fast forward to today, and I have a successful mentoring program that has impacted hundreds of aspiring and now current nurse anesthesia students. What I enjoy the most in my business is connecting with you, the future CRNA. I love learning and growing with you. The road to CRNA is full of unique challenges, and no 2 journeys are the same. But every journey has a learning opportunity. I'm here to share what I have learned over the years from not just my students, but CRNA community leaders, program faculty, and from my time as a practicing CRNA. This will be your one-stop shop to get the mentoring you need to not only guide you into this career path, but support you all the way through to graduation day. So if you're a nursing student who's exploring the possibility, an ICU nurse actively pursuing CRNA, or a current nurse anesthesia student, you're in the right place. Tune in for inspiration and actionable takeaways that will help you from start to finish. Let's get started. So this has been a very popular or a highly requested topic from you guys, so I hope you enjoy. Today we're going to talk about the different types of studying techniques that you can utilize today, whether you're still in your BSN or whether you're already embarking on your SRNA journey. And I also want to just say that I was there one day too. I was that student who didn't know how to study, and I thought I knew how to study. I thought I could just read a textbook, absorb the knowledge, and take a test. And that didn't really do anything for me except get B's and C's. And it wasn't until that I was faced with rejection from the College of Nursing in my college career, my freshman year, that I realized that I had to do something different, and what I was doing currently was not working. In fact, I remember spending an exorbitant amount of time trying to read, trying to study my notes without getting anything other than a C and B. And it just felt frustrating that I watched everyone else around me do that and get A's, while when I attempted to do that, I only got C's and B's. So I took it upon myself to take a full course load in the summer, that college year, my freshman year, and going into my sophomore year in college. And at the time, it was 2005, I just Googled study techniques and I tried them all. I learned a lot by doing that. And I also learned that I was not studying effectively for me. And I also kind of opened my eyes to the fact that there was numerous ways to study, and I was only taking advantage of one little small piece of that. And so that's what I want to share with you guys today, that the more you take advantage of the various techniques, the better you're going to get at studying. One of the first things I want to dive into is auditory learning and your style of learning, I should say. So between auditory, visual, reading and writing, and kinesthetic, which is kind of doing it physically, doing the motions, like hands-on learning, there's various styles of learning. And so we're going to cover auditory first. That's probably, I would say, this day and age with all the podcasts out there, YouTube channels, and all the recorded lectures now, that's probably one of the most common ways students now tend to learn. And this is great. It's definitely a great way to learn. I actually bought a little handheld recorder back in the day and took it to class with me. But nowadays, again, with everything being so online and virtual, most professors are recording their lectures anyways and posting it online for you. But if you don't have access to that, I do encourage you to go out and buy a little tiny handheld recorder, sit close to the front of the classroom, don't be afraid, no one bites, and record your lectures, because this will be invaluable to you as you review the lectures later when you're going back over your notes. Because I can't tell you time and time again, when I would do this and re-listen to my lectures, how much you miss the first time in your actual attending the class, whether it's because you're distracted or you're busy writing notes on what they just said and missed the next topic, whatever it may be. I promise you, if you re-listen to your lectures, you will pick up on new information that you missed the first time around. So that's number one. I want you to record your lectures. I want you to even record yourself speaking your own notes. So auditory, again, can be used in multiple ways. It's not just about listening to podcasts or listening to your lecture. It's about using your ears as one sensory mechanism to learn, along with other mechanisms like writing things down. So as you're listening, you want to be taking notes. That's combining two different techniques. That's hands-on skills along with auditory. And so I think the most important thing I gathered when I was learning how to study was you need to combine more than one method to actually have an effective study session. And so again, auditory is great, but make sure you're utilizing taking notes at the same time. Now, I get that's not always possible if you're in the car or if you're busy doing something else. Listening and re-listening to lectures is still better than not doing it at all. So if that's the only thing you can do, then by all means, listen and learn. But if you can take the time to actually sit down and take notes while you're listening, that would probably benefit you more. Okay, so that's one technique. The next one is visual learning. Okay, so for visual learning, this may seem like common sense, but it's looking at graphs, looking at charts that you make, and actually not just looking at them, but you actually, again, want to be practicing writing these down. You want to be practicing drawing them out. So again, you're combining the hands-on technique with the visual aspect of learning. This can be for anything that you're color coding. I am a big fan of highlighters. Back when I used to study, when I did not know how to study, I would use yellow for everything. I would highlight everything in yellow and thought that would help me remember it. But that was not the case. When I started mixing up my colors, maybe I would highlight the vast majority in yellow. And then when I got to say a topic that I know they hit in the notes or in lecture, I would then alternate to a different color like orange. And I would highlight that particular topic in orange because I knew it was an important topic that they hit on in class. And then I would go back to my yellow and highlight as I go. Then when I hit the next important topic that I knew I needed to know it for the test or something like that, I would highlight it in blue. So I would alternate colors. I kind of had rainbow pages in my books and in my notes. But what this did was when I was taking a test, I may not know the answer, but I could remember that I did read about it, and whatever I read about it was in orange. And it would kind of help me or help jog my memory, okay, what was in orange? What did I highlight in orange? What did I highlight in pink? And I don't have a photogenic memory by any means, but this was the closest I got to photogenic memory, was remembering the color and what was in that color, whether it be a term, a certain word, a concept, whatever it may be. So take advantage of that, try it out, see if it works. I have had students who tell me that's why they like colored pens. Me, I never utilize, to me, that just takes too much back and forth to change pens all the time. I already get a writer's cramp as it is. But if that works for you, try writing in different colored pens, maybe write one have a variety of pens in front of you so you can kind of keep going back and forth as you're taking notes. I also know that most students these days use some type of iPad, whether it be an iPad Pro or whatever I think even HPs, I know HPs can do it as well. They have like little tablets for those, and there's Notion and Notability. Notion is for HPs and Notability is for Macs, and you can take notes that way. And I do know for at least the MacBook, there's a cover you can get that allows it to feel like paper. So it doesn't matter whether you're physically using real paper or you're using your iPad like paper. Handwriting notes is one of the best ways to memorize what you're actually hearing and learning visually. So whether you're hearing it, whether you're reading it, by actually physically writing it down at the same time, you're going to help jog your memory better. So it's not just reading, it's reading and taking notes. It's not just hearing, it's hearing and taking notes. So I hope you guys are picking up on the fact that the best study techniques are usually a couple different methods combined. So that's, again, an example of visual learning and taking advantage of using different colors when you highlight things, or drawing out graphs, and practicing. Repetition's key. With anything learning, repetition is key. You can't expect it to read something once or hear something once and know it well. You really have to be utilizing and multitasking essentially by re-listening and rereading things. One of the things I used to do as well is I used to read my textbook or my notes, and I would retake the notes. And then I would actually physically speak it out into my recorder and study my study guide into my recorder. Then I would take that recorder and I would plug in my earbuds and I would walk to class listening to those notes I recorded myself saying. And it was the act of physically saying my notes out loud that actually helped jog my memory when I was trying to recall that information for my test. So again, it's two different techniques combined. It's the physical task of talking and the auditory portion. And so again, that's combining two different techniques into one. And so that can be used again in any different method that you see fit. I also used to go take my notes to the gym. So I would have my PowerPoint presentation printed out. I would take notes on that. Then I would take that PowerPoint presentation to the gym. And I did have to play around with types of activities I could do at the gym, but I finally found an arc trainer, which is kind of like an elliptical, but it's more smooth and it's not as bouncy as a elliptical. I would take and sit my notes on that arc trainer and I would reread them as I listened to whatever music I wanted to. And I didn't re-listen to my notes. I would actually listen to music I enjoyed listening to. And that did a couple things. It actually got me energized and motivated and excited and awake, essentially. And that was the same thing that the exercise was doing for me. It was getting me awake. It was keeping me engaged and paying attention to what I was doing versus just sitting in a boring chair in a dim room and trying to read your notes and, dozing off and daydreaming about something else you'd rather be doing. The activity and physical activity of going to the gym and actually being physically active while I was trying to learn helped me retain my information so much better. And that's actually 90% of what I thought helped me the most when I actually was in my undergrad years and started getting straight A's for the first time. And not to mention, actually, I was in really good shape by the time I was done with school. So try it out. If you have a treadmill at home, you don't have to run. I mean, sometimes that gets too bouncy, but that's when you can run and maybe listen to your notes if you can't read because it's too bouncy. But if you want to walk on a treadmill or something like that, take your notes and read your notes. Try to combine physical activity with learning. That in itself will kind of help you retain things more. Hey there, I hope you enjoyed that episode and I'm so excited to be able to reshare that with you. I just wanted to recap a big takeaway for me when I re-listened to the episode is to make sure you are combining more than two study methods. So without further ado, let's get into the next episode, which is CRNA School Rejection. It is not uncommon to get rejected from anesthesia school. The reality is most people who get rejected do not share that they got rejected. What you see on social media, what you see on Instagram, you see people's highlight reels, you see people bragging about their acceptance. What you don't know is it might have been on their 13th try. I have reached out to several of my students who have faced several rejections and asked them to share their story. They're usually more than happy to do so. And I think it's very inspirational when that type of thing takes place. But unfortunately, it's not usually something people are openly putting out there on Instagram or Facebook for people to read or nursing forums or anything like that. So I think people paint an unrealistic picture of what applying to CRNA school is going to be like. And so when they do face rejection, they think that they're just not meant for them. They're not cut out for it. But the reality is plenty of working CRNAs have faced rejection and they do just fine. They're good CRNAs. They're great providers. A lot of them are now educators. So I don't want rejection or being waitlisted to hinder your progress with moving forward. Okay, so number one is I see the student who decides they want to do CRNA. They go into the ICU and then they kind of rush into their application. They rush into applying to CRNA school with barely a minimum of a year under their belt. And, they don't necessarily think much about it. They just think, okay, well, I have a good GPA. I now work in the ICU. I'm going to go ahead and apply and get in. And then they're kind of taken back by either not getting an interview or they get an interview and then they don't get in. And there's a couple things that could be happening here. Now, the problem with kind of giving anyone direct guidance is that every situation is very unique. Every application is very unique. So while it's hard to I'm not trying to umbrella everyone under the same umbrella, but I do know a lot of similarities do exist between certain situations. So I want to preference that. This isn't going to categorize everyone in this category. But essentially, a couple things could be happening. One, the applicant may have kind of a skewed view of what their GPA actually is. And what I mean by that is, have you really taken the time to break down your overall GPA and your science GPA? Schools will be doing this. And so it is key before you even apply, well before you apply, that you actually know what your science GPA is. The reason why this is so important is because you could have a 4.0 in your BSN and your ADN could only be a 3.2, but your science GPA could be a 2.8. So that being said, you may not even get an interview because schools will see the 2.8 science GPA. And even though your overall GPA between your ADN and your BSN is a 3.4, they're not going to give you a chance to interview. So you could be applying thinking you're fine because your GPA is a 3.4 overall. And then you get kind of kicked in the gut essentially when you don't get asked to interview and not understand why. And so one of the biggest mistakes, secondly, that I see students make in this situation is they do not reach out to the programs to get advice after this happens to them. They are left thinking, well, I guess the 3.4 is not good enough. And then they proceed to tell their coworkers that, who also want to be CRNAs. And then their coworkers get discouraged and they don't apply. And so this kind of creates a vicious cycle. And I have so many students who have been in similar situations to this and who are kind of misled into thinking that just because they're not a 3.8 student, or what if they have academic past that they're embarrassed of, therefore they just won't even apply. And see, even with a 2.8, it is still possible to get an anesthesia school. However, you will have your work cut out for you. You will have to take graduate level courses, more than likely, possibly more than one, such as grad pathophysiology, maybe even a chemistry course or pharmacology course or a microbiology course, grad stats course, maybe several of those to get that GPA up over a 3.0 to apply. Now, before you go out and start signing up for courses, please stop. Do not go out and sign up for graduate level courses because I'm telling you this. You never want to do that, A, because it could be wasting your time and money, and B, all schools are going to be giving you different advice. So you want to make sure before you do anything that you're thoroughly researching your school of choice, your dream school. Even if you do not have a school in mind, even if you're like, well, Jenny, I have like 10 schools I'm going to apply to. How do I narrow them down? Pick a couple and reach out for guidance. If you know you have a lower science GPA, pick a couple schools, see which ones will give you the time of day, and ask for a transcript review. They will give you guidance on what to do next. The ones who don't, move on, reach out to another program. I'm telling you, some schools will give you a free transcript review. Other schools will not make that time. Probably depends on how easily they can handle that with their staffing and what kind of resources they have and time they have available to give you. But it's always worth asking. The worst thing they're going to say is, no, we don't do that, or no, we can't do that. And that's also where we come into play. I have students who are not able to get those types of one-on-one calls with the program director or get a transcript review. Well, guess what? CRNA School Prep Academy has Richard Wilson, who's a faculty member who does transcript reviews for our students. So there is help. Don't feel like you're ever stuck without help, because there is help out there. That's the first place to start. Do that first before you sign up for any classes. Because again, classes are not cheap, you guys. That's $2,000 or $3,000 and a lot of your time that could be spent on doing other things that would actually help you more. Because what if you took a pathophysiology course that won't even transfer to your dream school. But if you just would have known better, they actually prefer chemistry, and they would have told you what chemistry course to take and what transfer credits they take if you just would have reached out. And so that is what I mean. You don't want to just go taking courses without having any guidance, but you have to know your science GPA, and then you have to get a guidance from there. Okay. So prove your science GPA. And if you don't know how, you need to reach out for guidance on that. So that's number one tip for you as far as potentially facing rejection or not even getting an interview. The second common reason that I see students potentially not even get an interview is because they misinterpret potentially the ICU experience or some of the other recommendations from the school. And when I say recommendations, it's because these schools, a lot of them put in this language in their application requirements, recommended, preferred. Well, it depends on how you interpret that, right? Well, if it's recommended or preferred, it's not required. That is where a lot of people go wrong. And keep in mind how competitive these schools are. They do not have to take a student who didn't take the preferred method of applying. They don't have to take the student who didn't take the recommendation. They will have plenty of students who took all the recommendations and did all the preferred preferences to pick from. So essentially, when you're saying no to a recommended item or to a preferred item, but not required, you're essentially already setting yourself up not to be the most competitive candidate. And these come down to things like CCRN, job shadowing experience, and ICU experience. So your school could say they may take ER experience on an individual basis. Well, what does that mean? It means they don't prefer ER experience, but they will consider it. If you're a above and beyond candidate in other areas, they will consider it. Does it mean you're going to be the most competitive applicant with that experience? No, it does not. Does it mean you shouldn't apply? Absolutely not. I'm not saying that at all. But it does mean you should reach out to your program and inquire about that experience, and also make sure you go the extra mile in the rest of your application and make sure you can make up for that if they see that as potentially a pitfall. And the same thing goes with NICU, PICU experience. Make sure you're researching your schools before you take these ICU positions. It is very unfortunate when I see these nurses have this dream to become a CRNA and then gain all their ICU experience in a NICU, only when they go to apply to CRNA school, realize their school does not take the NICU experience. And it's a lot of times these schools, again, they don't have to be flexible. They don't have to take you on an individual basis. Sometimes you get lucky and they will consider you, but sometimes it's a hard, fast no, we don't take that experience. And so now you're stuck with a couple options. A, giving up on your dream of becoming a CRNA, or B, starting over again in a different ICU to gain that experience so you can then apply. So please don't let that happen to you. That can set you back years. And again, that's kind of hard to swallow if you had this kind of anticipation of going back to school for all this time only to be kind of sucker punched. So make sure you're researching your school. That should be starting from day one that you decide CRNA is for you. You should be researching your school, knowing what ICUs they accept, knowing what their requirements are, what their preferences are, and academically, where your GPA falls on a range of being competitive. I will tell you right now that most commonly accepted GPA, the average amongst all the schools in the country, is right around a 3.5, 3.6. Now, that means half are below that, half are above that. So don't get discouraged if you don't have a 3.5. I'm just letting you know that if you think you're on the low end of that spectrum, make sure you're taking an extra initiative to look into things you can do to better yourself. Some schools only require the GRE if you have a GPA less than 3.3. Some of it's a 3.2, some of it's a 3.4. And so again, the only way you're going to know this is if you actually research your school. And I will preach and preach and preach. You guys go to the open houses. This is the best way. Sometimes and I've dug through many schools' websites at this point, and I'm right there with you. Holy cow. It can be a lot to dig through, and sometimes it's not easy to find. Some schools are a lot more forthcoming with stats and information than others. Some hasn't been updated for years. So again, make sure you're going to the open houses if they actually offer an open house. That is the best way to get the most concrete, up-to-date information that you can find out there. It also could be an opportunity for you to network with current SRNAs and ask them questions and hopefully talk to the program director. So again, make sure you're using that to your advantage. So that's kind of situation number one that I see as being a common situation is students rushing into the application and not thoroughly researching their school and their requirements to apply and necessarily knowing how to be a competitive candidate between GPA and ICU experience. The next most common reason I see people get rejected from anesthesia school, you guys, is the interview. So 4.0 students with great ICU experience, leadership experience, you name it, they have it all. Their application, they're a rock star.
I've actually talked to several faculty who routinely say they have students who they're really excited to meet based on their resume and their application. They're like, oh, I can't wait to meet this person. They're just going to be an all-star. And they get in the interview and it's just bad. So, not everyone can be a beautiful interviewer. Not everyone can connect with someone instantly who's a stranger. I mean, sometimes people are more gifted in that area than others, and it is what it is. The reality is you have to know that about yourself, and preparation is key for most people. There are going to be the occasional person out there who can whip into the interview with no practice, no preparation, and still do well. Well, if that's you, kudos, congratulations, that's awesome. But the vast majority are going to need preparation, including myself. My very first CRNA school interview did not go well. I knew it did not go well, but it was a learning experience, and it allowed me to prepare more for my second one.
Well, hello there. So I hope that episode really resonated with you, and I hope it gave you some inspiration to keep pushing forward. Some big takeaways from this episode that I want to make sure I pointed on again to you is that do not let a rejection essentially slow you down from achieving your dream of becoming a CRNA. And know that people don't necessarily share this type of thing on social media. So when you see people post about their acceptance, you may not know that they have also been rejected several times. So don't make it reflect upon you as who you are. Just know that it's a very common experience to face rejection and to look for ways to improve and keep moving forward. And as far as looking for ways to improve, I mentioned in there briefly, I see people kind of rush into the application process. And I talked about this a little bit. I did some lives over CRNA Week inside of ICU Dreaming About Anesthesia Facebook community. If you're not a part of that community, I highly encourage you to do it. We give resources and do a lot of live trainings in that group. However, I talked a little bit about how sometimes you have to slow down to speed up. And the reason why slowing down can be really effective, especially when you're planning and preparing for CRNA school, is because we all have blind spots. And so you really have to be slowing down and making sure that you're tackling your application as best as you possibly can, essentially putting your best foot forward from the beginning. So I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Now for the very last episode, I saved the best for last. And again, it's with our expert contributor, Richard Wilson, who again is part of CRNA School Prep Academy, and he shares his insights into tackling the CRNA interview. So I hope you enjoy.
So, Jenny, there are a lot of different things that we as committee members are looking for. I mean, it's amazing that as I talk to more and more faculty members, not just only within our program, but also across the nation, how many different aspects and different characteristics that interview committees can just really glean in an applicant from a simple 15-minute conversation. Really even talk with some of our students afterwards as they get into the programs, and they're like, I didn't even know you could see that in me. When you interviewed us. And some of those really is we're really looking at, can these applicants articulate why they want to be a nurse anesthetist? That is one thing that sometimes applicants don't think a lot about. They know they want to do it, but just being able to articulate that well to an interview committee is very key, because that's the basics. So we really want to see, can they articulate their reasons of why they want to become a nurse anesthetist? Other things that we look for and that are key characteristics is, can they articulate what their clinical knowledge is? And that is diving deep into the patient care that they provide, into the protocols and understandings of it. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, hopefully, as we move through this podcast, because I got some great ideas as you kind of prepare for interviews. But really taking a deep dive into those topics, really those that you should be familiar with. And what they're testing you with in that is really, can you critically think and can you articulate that knowledge? Can you speak of that knowledge in a fashion that really tells a lot about you? And then, of course, everybody knows this, but it's so hard to prepare for, is how do you handle a stressful moment? Anesthesia school interviews are some of the most stressful moments that people go through in their lives. And that's probably because most of our applicants have not really had to truly interview for a nursing position. It was probably they worked as a PCT on the unit, did a residency on that unit, and was obviously hired there. So they never truly interviewed. So the pressure of never doing a formal interview, along with the pressure that the applicants put on themselves because of the big moment that exists here, which could potentially change their lives, really, plays into the stress that they create on themselves. And so we're trying to really see, as I tell people and as I give advice, we're trying to see, do you really stand up to the pressure, or do you curl up in the fetal position in the corner and kind of, buckle down? So really trying to see, and we're going to talk a little bit also later on with some of the questions that I want to kind of get to on how do you do that? How do you really present yourself so that they can tell all of these great things about you?
Yes, all excellent points. And I really love how you start off with kind of knowing your why. That is definitely something that I don't think a lot of people truly think about, in a sense that's really their why. And a why is not just why you want to, it's kind of why are you passionate about pursuing this? What is it about this that really will get you excited to go to work every day? And knowing that is kind of, like you said, hard to articulate if you don't take the time to actually sit and think about it and maybe even write it out. So all really great points. So I guess also kind of to spin it a little bit, we just talked about some things that candidates should be aware of as far as what they're looking for. But what would you say are some like major red flags that you can see in a candidate coming into the interview, other than curling up in a fetal position?
So we see several red flags. And again, we're going to talk about the interview process here, not the actual application. So what we see when we look at the red flags is, one, avoidance of eye contact. Eye contact in an interview really displays that you have confidence in your answers. You have confidence in your knowledge, that you really want to communicate with the faculty and the staff. So really that eye contact with the committee while you're answering questions is very key. That is one thing that we want to make sure that you can do, because if you can communicate with the faculty in the interview committee during these stressful situations, we know that when you get in the operating rooms, you'll have the ability to also communicate with the faculty that'll be teaching you in the operating rooms. We look at consistent answers that are diving deep into the knowledge base rather than surface level answers. So the committees really want to understand that want to know that you understand the material that you're practicing. And if it's just a surface level answer, then they can't get that. So that's another red flag. Monotone speaking is something that I noted. We get nervous, and sometimes we are not able to present ourselves very well. So if we have a very monotone type talk, we wonder what gets your engine revving. Can you get worked up in a situation? Now, not to a point where, of course, you're out of control, but when we talk about not having that monotone speaking, there's a passion that is shown in the deflection of your voice. And so we follow that because we see, okay, great. They have a passion for what they want to do. They have a passion for the knowledge that they're going to gain in the profession that they're going to be entering. So even that level of a voice deflection can make a huge difference in an interview. And then the last thing I kind of noted was really confrontational words, gestures, or poses. We get real defensive sometimes when somebody's challenging us. And yes, guys, we're going to talk about this in a few minutes, but we as faculty members will challenge you in an interview just to see a reaction. And we want to see what that is, because there's going to be times in the operating rooms, whether it's the nurse tech, whether it is the surgical tech, whether it's the nurse, whoever it may be, surgeon, even a preceptor, that really challenges you on a topic, on a treatment plan, on just a thought process. And so we've got to see that you can work in that team environment and work well in that team environment. So yes, we can tell when confrontational words come out, or gestures, or different poses that you have during an interview. So all of those become red flags, because we're like, okay, if they're going to be confrontational in something that means this much to them, such as an interview, what are they going to be like when they actually get in? And there's, probably more at risk at that point in time. So those are really some red flags that really come up. Again, it's all about the demeanor that you take and the depth of knowledge that you show that become red flags if you can't do that.
Yeah, that's excellent. One thing I want to, that you mentioned, the surface information that you have, if that's all you have. You guys, I think a lot of people maybe try to cram for their interviews. I don't ever recommend that. But the problem with cramming is, remember, you're doing like maybe 100 interviews?
We do in our program, we do anywhere from 60 to 70 interviews a year.
Okay. So that's every year. So these panels can easily pick up on whether someone is spitting out information from a textbook versus whether they truly understand the concept. So really, you're not going to get a lot of benefit out of cramming. So you really need to be tackling the interview, studying way ahead of time, and not just memorizing numbers and stats. You have to understand what that means physiologically too. And yeah, the tone of voice. we're human. We're all human, right? We all communicate, and they say communication starts before you ever say a word. And so that is key, knowing that going into your interview, that really first impressions do matter. And a lot of it is body language. So, and like you said, the tone of your voice. So that's all really great information. Thank you so much for sharing all that.
And Jenny, if I can dive into a little bit more what you're talking about with the surface, I tell you, there's so many times that we as faculty members will tell individuals, or the guidance we give is, hey, don't give us the Google answer from the night before. And a lot of the faculty members, as we talk about the surface level answers, can tell what's a Google answer that you've studied, as you mentioned, from the night before to memorize and give to them versus, an answer that really is understood, that you've practiced many times. I know this is a very simple process and a very simple answer, but I'm a very simplistic minded individual. And the way I ask people is I'm like, think about your significant other. Were you able to memorize their phone number after the first time you got it? And most answers were no. You had to repeat that information several times before you remembered it. And therefore, that's what we tell you about the knowledge base that you need to have going into interviews. It needs to be repeated several times so that it's understood. And that is the confidence. When you understand it, you're able to display that confidence to the committee. When you're just reading it or trying to recite what you memorized the day before or the night before, the committee can tell the confidence in your knowledge base from that. So those are two big things, to really think about. Remember, GRE, GPA, and clinical experience really is all just paper. It's really just numbers, data that's put on paper. The only thing that truly is going to show whether you can really fit into a program, be successful in that program, and be a successful nurse anesthetist is a personal interaction. So really the interview committee is trying to gauge, and this is their chance to really gauge who you are. Gauge your ability to understand the clinical application of what you're learning in the ICU. Gauge the ability or the sense of the applicant's personality, their work ethic, their motivation. All of this plays into whether they'll be a fit for one program or another, right? I talk about this all the time. There's over 100 programs in the nation. I convince people, not convince, but I discuss with people and try to convince them, look, this may be your number one program, whether it's our program, whether it is somewhere in California, whether it is somewhere in Ohio, that may be your number one program. However, understand, it may not be a fit for you, and you may not be a fit for them, which means you won't be successful. So this is really the program and your chance to gauge how you fit together. So just as much as they are interviewing you as an applicant, you as an applicant are interviewing them as a faculty and as a program. And that's key to know, because the thing is, you may not fit in a program in Ohio. However, the one in Michigan may be a fit for you, right? Because they may focus on some different areas. And so that's why I always say the interview is important, because they can really tell what kind of person you are, your work ethic, your ambition, your ability to interact. All of that plays into, because what they'll look at is say, I know Jenny, I interviewed Jenny, I love her personality. I know the CRNAs at the facility she's going to clinically train. They will love her personality. Let's take Jenny. She'll be a great fit. However, I interviewed Richard. Smart guy, but I'm telling you, there was something there. Looking at what's going on there, knowing the clinical training side he's going to be at, they're going to not mesh very well, and he won't be successful. So it really is all about being seen if you're a great fit for the program and can successfully complete the program. The goal of every program, right, and your goal as an applicant should be that I'm going to get into a nurse anesthesia program. I'm going to successfully complete it. I'm going to pass the national certification exam, i.e. boards, on my first attempt, and I'm going to get a job. It never should be, I'm just taking a shot in the dark to see if this works out for me. This is more important than any of that. And that's why programs and applicants should take it that seriously and really see if they're a fit. And that's what the interview is all about.
Oh my goodness, that episode was jam-packed full of so many goodies. It's actually hard for me to pick just a few big takeaways from that episode. But I wanted to do a little recap as well on episode 9. And some big takeaways for me is that you may have never experienced a formal interview, especially if you were working on your unit prior as a nurse's aide, you maybe had an easier time getting into your ICU position. So practice. Putting yourself in an uncomfortable interview position and practicing is really key as far as preparing yourself for the real deal for CRNA school interview. Also, I just want to touch on a few red flags that he pointed out during your interview. One of them being making eye contact. And also, you might not realize you're not making eye contact. So that kind of goes back to practicing because, again, you may not know that you are looking at the floor or at the table because you are nervous or you are scared. We do mock interviews inside of CRNA School Prep Academy. So again, make sure you're taking advantage of that. We also do group mock interview coaching, and this is by yours truly, Richard Wilson, CSBA's expert contributor. We do those every other month. So make sure you're planning ahead and attending these events. We also do put the replays of the group mock interview coaching in our mock interview library. But again, you have an opportunity to get a one-on-one mock interview with people that we have hand-selected to be on our mock interview team. So make sure you're taking advantage of that. Another big red flag I want to point out is being monotone. And again, this can go from being nervous, but if you're listening to this podcast, I think you appreciate the fact that I am not monotone. In fact, I tend to change my pitch quite often based on how I'm feeling, the mood I'm in, if I'm feeling silly, if I'm feeling under the weather, however it is, you could probably pick it up in my voice. So imagine how these interview panels must feel when someone comes in the room and they sit there and they speak monotone. So make sure you're bringing awareness to this. And this is again done by practicing. Also, not just knowing surface level information is really important because again, this is very competitive. And so they're really assessing your in-depth and how knowledgeable you are on what they're asking you. And if all you can tell them is a surface level answer, that's all they're going to think you know. And so don't be afraid too. I think some candidates are also afraid of opening up in their interview because they're afraid of them catching them in something wrong. But it's better to be caught in something that maybe you don't know but go further with it than to just give them a surface level answer and not tell them everything else you know. So don't be fearful. Give it your best shot. Tell them what you do know. Do not say, I don't know. And I'm going to leave it at that. This was so much fun. All right, well, that wraps up our episode today. I really hope you guys enjoyed. And just as a quick reminder, we went over study techniques, which is episode number 2. Again, the link for that full episode is going to be in the show notes. We went over rejection from CRNA school, which is episode number 4. Link is in the show notes. And the CRNA school interview, episode number 9. All of these links are in the show notes below. And thank you so much for tuning in to CRNA School Prep Academy podcast. I appreciate you. If you would do me a favor, if you could actually leave me a takeaway from these episodes, if you head over to CRNASchoolprepacademy.com podcast, if you can actually leave a comment under these episodes, I would love to hear what your big takeaways were. And as always, cheers to your future. We'll see you next week. Hey, future CRNA. As always, I appreciate you and your loyalty. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. I'd love to hear from you, so screenshot this episode and share it to your IG stories with your biggest takeaway. Don't forget to include the hashtag CRNA School Prep Academy. If you're on Facebook, be sure to join ICU Dreaming About Anesthesia by CRNA School Prep Academy. This is a private community that you will find free guidance and support along your journey into CRNA school. Stay strong, and I'll see you next week.